Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I'm a security researcher at Varonis, and today we're trying it with myself. I am once again running the stream all by myself, so be prepared for audio issues, maybe my computer to die, my headphones to die. It's always a surprise on this new version of the stream that I am responsible for producing. I want to say hello to everyone out there, James and also War Panda, who has excellent taste in music. And we're going to take your questions this week, answer any hacking related questions you have. And unfortunately, as Michael is on sabbatical dealing with a squatch, we aren't able to answer any cryptozoology related questions. However, I am happy to see everyone here and excited to answer any questions you might have. I'm also going to be throwing in something a little bit new. So on our Friday episodes, we tend to do cybersecurity news. And I used to throw in like a bunch of tools that I thought were interesting or cool as well. But we always run out of tools to cover, or sorry, we always run out of time to cover tools because there's so much news every week. So I'm going to start covering some tools on here that I actually do have a chance to experiment with, or that just look really useful because I figure, hey, other cybersecurity researchers are probably going to be interested in what's available out there for you to try out and use. So hello to everybody in the chat. Hello to James, Funky Monkey, and War Panda. And I just have to point out the last RSA conference I went to before the pandemic, when I kind of stopped going to RSA for a while, the Midnight was actually playing. And like we got shuffled off to some venue that was bought out by like Hackeroni or something like that. And the Midnight was playing. It was really cool. So yeah, that band is very affiliated with hackers. I feel like it's an excellent song to hack to. All right, so lots of different things that I want to cover today. Again, if you have a question, feel free to chime in. But I'm really excited also because I got to go down to the University of Montana and do a really fun cybersecurity presentation a couple of weeks ago. And then I might also be getting to do a cybersecurity summer camp for like middle schoolers and other people who are a little bit younger in my area, which is really, really cool. So getting funding for that is awesome. I'm looking at all the various ways that it would be interesting and engaging to teach cybersecurity to younger people. So if you have had a great experience teaching cybersecurity people to that are around like middle school age, like fun lessons or anything like that, please reach out to me. Let me know what kind of stuff middle schoolers are interested in, because honestly, I've got a little bit of catching up to do. It's been a long time for me since middle school. So I'm really excited for that later in the summer. And also hello to you're kind of far away. Dust Toast. Yes. Hello. You made it to the live stream, and it's great to see all of you. So first up this week, I want to talk a little bit about some OSINT tools. So OSINT tools are important for anybody doing investigations because, surprise, surprise, there's a lot of data out there. And sometimes we need to validate whether or not that data is real nowadays in the era of manipulated images and AI-generated stuff. So I've seen some clearly AI-generated videos shared around. Some people seem to think that they're actually legit. And there's also some AI-generated images that people might be confused about whether or not they're real. So this is a thread of different tools I saw for OSINT investigation, which includes text extraction, deepfake detection, instant identification of keyframes, and metadata view. So let's say that we are doing some sort of investigation and we find a video that's particularly relevant and we want to do some interesting things. Well, first, we might want to download it. So downloaders are certainly useful. And if you find that you might want to download something off YouTube, then some of these actually will work for that. Others don't want to get taken down, so they won't. And you can see there's a bunch of different available options for what resolution you can download it at. And I would download it at the highest possible resolution for this particular video file. Now, when it comes to going through those individual frames, sometimes things happen really fast. I remember just yesterday, I was looking at an old video that we did in Hack5 where we had a laptop that exploded. We actually put a lot of fireworks inside of, actually, it was like a baking pan that looked like the backside of a laptop, and we packed it full of fireworks and we exploded it. And I'm trying to see at what moment the flying piece of metal actually endangered our videographer the most. So in order to do that, I had to go frame by frame by frame. And it was very annoying to do that with the slider. So some of these tools that allow you to take advantage of maybe like a glimpse of someone or an event that's happening very quickly that's recorded, allow you to go back and do a forensic investigation of very, very specific parts of the video. Super, super useful for those sorts of investigations. So then timestamps help you quickly determine timestamps on which there's a change of scenery in the video and significantly save time watching it. So that'll go through and automatically analyze where there was like motion or like something actually happened by looking for a certain amount of change, which again, if you're scrubbing through a very long piece of surveillance data, or if you have like maybe in this example, something from a trail cam or a hidden camera that isn't automatically turned off or on by motion, this would be a way of effectively going back retroactively and getting notified on any sort of motion. So that's pretty cool. We also have, let's see, extracting text from neural networks and translating it. So this is great, of course, for there's a lot of like war footage coming out of Ukraine or people speaking. I don't speak Ukrainian and I also don't speak Russian. So if you want context or to understand what people are saying in some of these videos, you might be investigating for all sorts of reasons, then being able to automatically extract information and then translate it is certainly a very, very valuable skill. All right, and then we can also go into, recognizing text and subtitles, that's a lot. Using ChatGPT to create a summary. We haven't even gotten to deepfakes. Okay, here we go. So there are a couple of different tools that are available for you to try to determine whether or not you are being tricked by a deepfake. So these are, in my opinion, some of the more useful things as salacious images might be generated and spread around that look maybe probable. Unfortunately, there's a lot of very, very low quality video footage that could be real or could be fake. It's kind of hard to tell anymore that are being spread around on social media channels. So this might be an opportunity for journalists who are trying to get at least some sort of a handle on whether or not this information is real or fake, would be able to actually determine whether some of these videos, for example, could have been faked or if they were manipulated in some way, shape, or form, which is kind of getting increasingly difficult to be able to tell when that's happened. So just a really good thread of all these different available tools for OSINT investigators to go through data and figure out exactly what is real and what is not. So just checking the chat really quick. All right, War Panda. Pretty new to Microcontroller. Oh, should put this question up. I hope I can answer it now that I put it up on the screen. And now I can barely read it. All right, so pretty new to microcontrollers and I have a few lying around. My question is, are there any small project involved in cybersecurity other than deauthors and such, which is what I'm using now? Okay, so here's a scenario. You have a microcontroller or you have a couple microcontrollers and they're lying around and you want to do something really, really cool with that microcontroller. Well, fortunately for you, I did a talk at the Hope conference that was basically going through every single bad thing you can do with a microcontroller. I believe it was called $5 cyber weapons and how to use them. I will go ahead and look that up really quick and get back to you on that. But yes, that talk was super fun. And I ended up kind of frightening the audience with all the stuff that you can do. Let me see if I can $5 cyber weapons and how to use them. So another thing that I like to point out is a lot of these like ESP8266 based microcontrollers or even the ESP32, they are able to do networking stuff. And there's actually a couple sketches that you can find that act as a NAT router and make it so that you can do the kinds of attacks that you would normally have to do against a full-on router against actually this little microcontroller instead. And what's cool here also is you can connect like an ESP32 or an ESP8266 to your router, like to your Wi-Fi, and then have it generate its own separate network and act as a network bridge. So you can either like attach like IoT devices to that like little like emulated router you've made on a microcontroller, or you can attack it using some of the techniques you would use on like normally like a routing device. And that I think is really awesome. So I just found it. I'm going to paste it in the chat for everyone who is here. And then I will also go ahead and turn my screen back on. And you can see this is the talk that I did at the Hope conference. So lots of really cool microcontrollers that are able to do hacking related things. We have some examples like the Pico Ducky. We have some examples like the Wi-Fi deauthor that you mentioned. Some of my beacon half handshake attacks that I go into more detail on. ESP bug for Wi-Fi spying, war driving, the Wi-Fi duck for an open source tool that's able to do USB rubber ducky style attacks. There's lots of stuff out there. So I highly recommend you check out this like almost hour-long talk on all the various things you can do with a couple of microcontrollers lying around, because they really went hard on finding every cybersecurity related project I could that a microcontroller could do. So I think this will answer your question pretty thoroughly, and thank you for asking. All right. Do you recommend any specific proxy provider? Let's see. So proxying is a little bit less of a thing than, oops, I think I set the right column. Yeah, I did. Proxying is a little bit less of a thing than using a VPN, because typically when you're doing a proxy, you're doing like a single hop and it's like not that important. Maybe things aren't even like encrypted. So proxies are frequently used to get around just like local access restrictions, like area restrictions, that sort of thing. They tend to be a little bit lower of a less of a deal than a VPN, because like there's less required to set them up, but there's also less security and less of a benefit in a lot of cases. I personally, for my VPN, use Mullvad, but I feel like too many people have found out about it, so I'm gonna have to like go dark and find a new one soon. But I like them; they're reliable, and I frankly I don't use them for anything I wouldn't mind the NSA finding out about. So for just protecting myself against like eavesdropping, or like being at coffee shops, making sure I'm not being DNS redirected to something I don't want to go to, like all that stuff like allows me to have a little bit of control over where my traffic is being routed when I'm in an unfamiliar area. And I do like Mullvad for that. I've used a lot of different VPN providers, and I still don't see one that like particularly blows me out of the water. And I certainly wouldn't use, like, I think the whole like Proton Mail thing eventually got a little overhyped, and now like their VPN, like I wouldn't touch that one personally. And then like I hear some other things with like NordVPN and issues with them like logging or whatever. PIA seems to be affiliated with some sort of like company that's done a bunch of like surveillance stuff in the past, or at least like push like malicious like or unwanted programs. It's such a weird market. Like Mullvad's fine for me for now, but again, like as I said, I'm pretty sure that eventually as that gets more popular, it's going to be harder and harder to find one that is good. Let's see. Oh yeah, somebody asked about Proton. Yeah, I just feel like too many people know about that one. And since Edward Snowden was like, go use this one, so many people have flocked to that service that like I feel in my bones that there is probably too many people using that now for it to be a kept secret anymore. All right, so one thing I wanted to shout out, this was really cool. I was using Adafruit Whippersnapper. So what is Whippersnapper? It's something that allows you to go to Adafruit IO, connect a board by like flashing a board with the software, adding in your Wi-Fi credentials, and then your configuration or API key. And then you can control the board remotely without using code. So does it work really great with what I was using, which was a USB nugget? No, it doesn't work 100% great. Although I was able to do a bunch of annoying stuff, like make like a magnetic switch and then make a buzzer that would go off and some other like low level stuff. I wasn't able to get too much into it, but I thought it was really cool that you can take like a microcontroller, flash it with one of these like firmware projects, and then be able to control it remotely to do a couple interesting things, or get data back from it so that it's like logging when a particular sensor goes off. And there was a number of different projects that were supported by it. I wasn't able to dive too much into it, but I found this to be pretty cool that I could change the color of the LED from the web interface back here. So really cool project by Adafruit. I enjoyed it. And yeah. All right, so somebody else is asking, what about making your own VPN from a Raspberry Pi? So I really hesitate when I'm rolling my own VPN, just because like big service providers like Cisco and whatever, like still mess this up and make it kind of hard for users to do sometimes. So I see that a lot of these like open source solutions, if you have a networking background, if you know what you're doing, go for it. Like if you feel confident, like I think that that's something that you could absolutely do. If you do not, then like maybe think about that, because like you could end up really messing something up and opening up your network to basically anybody. You really need to know your stuff when you're rolling your own VPN, or use a service that's so well documented that it's like super hard to mess it up. So I would just be careful rolling your own. It is definitely possible, but like take a networking class at your local community college before doing that, just so you can identify like where you might mess things up and at least be able to troubleshoot your own problems. But yeah, I mean, nothing's stopping you from doing that. It certainly is possible. It might be a little bit slow because Raspberry Pis might not be the best routing devices. For lightweight things like running a Pi hole, they're certainly good enough. But when it comes to things a little bit more advanced than that, then they could definitely get into into some problems. Let's see. Some more questions. All right. So I think that James is actually answering some of these questions well in the chat. So I'm going to move on to some other things I want to shout out this time. So I have been making my own version of the Wi-Fi nugget that has a battery. let me tell you a little bit about my adventure with this. So adding a battery add-on shouldn't be that difficult because these are based on the S2 Mini and the D1 Mini footprint. It's a very standardized footprint, and there's lots of these little like backpack add-ons that you can put on the back and give it a new ability. Super cool. In fact, I have like these bags here. Oh, let me switch. Let me switch back over here. I have these bags full of additional things that you can put on the back of these to add like a buzzer functionality or a battery functionality or an infrared reading and transmitting functionality. And that's really cool. So I thought it would be easy to just like snap this on the back, solder it in, and be able to have a functioning battery. But it was not that simple at all. So you might notice that this battery jack in here is like kind of messed up a little bit. It's like not in all the way. And that's because if you plug this in the correct way, smoke will come out of your board because the batteries that are being sold on Amazon, which I'm holding one right now, are actually inverted. And if you don't pay attention to the color of the cable and you just plug this in the way that it is designed to be plugged in, it will destroy your board. So I did not actually destroy one because I'd been warned about this problem, but you know, I wanted to play around with my Nugget a little bit, upgrade it, maybe like add some functionality. And I thought that it would be pretty simple. So if you are interested in upgrading your USB Nugget, if you've got one and you've been doing some hacking and you want to add a battery, just be careful because the battery add-ons that are out there are not necessarily compatible with the cheapest batteries you'll find on Amazon. But it was really cool to make a battery-powered Wi-Fi Nugget and have it able to do all this Wi-Fi hacking stuff just by, like running on a battery. I did notice though, you have to unplug it in order to turn it off. There's no, button or anything to do that. So that was a little bit annoying. But aside from that, this was a fun battery mod that I did to a Wi-Fi Nugget earlier this week. And I will be writing up if anybody is interested in checking it out. All right, so some other things that I like to shout out are easy to use tools for beginners who are doing OSINT challenges or even experienced people who want to keep up with the OSINT tools. Google Dorks Simplified is just a great resource for anybody who wants to learn about how to use Google Dorks. It simplifies them and has kind of a great resource for how to get started with them. So if you're looking for a great resource, then I was taking a look at this week and I really enjoyed reading it because I thought it was a great way for beginners to grasp some of these concepts and use some of these more advanced queries. Really, I mean, it's learning how to use Google as a database and then make very, very specific queries. So something that you might want to check out if you're interested in doing some more advanced Google Dorking, or if you've never checked it out before and want to see how to get started. All right, I'm going to check back in on the chat. Hello, James. Hello, Noise, and War Panda again. And then I also have a bunch of other tools that we'll go through. All right, so still a little bit of chatter about the VPN, which I don't know much about, but let's move on to some things that I do know about. So just mentioning microcontrollers sometimes have a little bit of a difficult time doing animations and stuff like that. If you are making animations for microcontrollers, this was a resource I found this week. Easygif allows you to make GIFs, animations, screens for any microcontroller you might be working with. It's free. It works well with CircuitPython. So if that's something you're working with, then I used this myself this week in order to make some cute faces, and I found it to work really well. Now, this is a piece of news I was going to save for Friday, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. Facebook's large language model leaked, and not like, like output from it, like the language model itself. So this is interesting. I'm really curious to see if later this week we'll be able to report on whether or not somebody has gotten this up and running or is actually able to like give feedback from it or like start poking around on it. So not a lot to say except for the fact that this did leak. It leaked on 4chan. So that's kind of an interesting detail on this. But we'll be checking in later on this week when we do the new show to see like exactly what is going on here and whether or not anybody reports back that they were able to get this up and running, because that would be truly interesting. Now, that being said, even if they did get it up and running, you might end up getting an output like this, where somebody is doing research on, who might have written a particular research paper, or they're studying a specific field and they want to find a paper relevant to it. And ChatGPT has an AI hallucination, which means they come up with something that sounds right or feels right to its neural network, but in fact is completely fabricated. Now, this has come up in a lot of contexts where ChatGPT will cite a paper that doesn't exist. And in this case, somebody doing research emailed a professor and was asking them about a paper that they'd written, but they never wrote it. it was merely a hallucination by ChatGPT while attempting to automate a portion of the research. So yeah, really, really interesting kind of side effect is that if you are a public speaker or a researcher, you might start getting people who are reaching out to you asking for you to comment on papers that you've never written or requesting a research paper that they simply can't find because, well, it doesn't exist because you never wrote it. All right, so now I want to go through a couple tools that I found on Kitplate this week, some of which I've had a chance to test out and some of which I have not been explicitly brave enough to. But one of them is Squarefish. So I was intrigued by the use of a QR code in this. And what I was interested by in particular is that it uses a QR code to trigger like a OAuth device authentication flow and add itself as a malicious application. So like, how does this work? Okay, so the way that this works is that this tool will generate both like a server to listen and then also a QR code that will have, when a victim scans it, this weird authentication flow process begin that looks as though it is like the two-factor MFA update that's authenticating, but instead is actually adding yourself as an app via OAuth. That should give the attacker the ability to interact with whatever service they're attacking as whatever the defined scope of that application is. So if you get a lot of permissions on this, then you could potentially phish someone with just this weird QR code. So of course, there's a lot more going on here. There's the back end of actually running the server and other things you might need a little bit more resources for. But I was intrigued by something that uses QR codes in this kind of interesting and creative way. Because frankly, if you're trying to sneak a malicious link or like a blacklisted URL past like a URL scanner and like past all these other tools that are going to do their best to look for these sorts of things, encoding it optically so that the scanner can't find it is a pretty brilliant way of tricking a user into instead using a third-party device, like a device they brought from home that's still logged into work accounts, like maybe their smartphone, to scan this and log in that way. So very, very clever. And it was something that I wasn't expecting to see as an attack vector for a QR code. All right, so James says, I checked a QR code the other day. I took a picture of it and ran through an online tool to see what it was. That way, no risk to me. Yeah, like when you see QR codes up in the distance or out, in the environment, you should be careful when scanning them because some operating systems will attempt to automatically join Wi-Fi networks when it recognizes it as a Wi-Fi network. And that could be actually injecting a Wi-Fi network into your phone that's a malicious network that, if it is set to be hidden, will actually cause your device to begin putting out this network name that lets everybody know that, hey, your phone will connect to this network that they created, and they could potentially be able to track you as you move around as well. That's a pretty big risk. And what James is saying is, scanning it, but like maybe not opening anything up and instead taking the URL and examining it in like a safer context. Like that is probably a better idea than just scanning it and letting it run whatever application it decides to try to run. All right, so Warpanda is asking, has anybody had experience using an IDS/IPS with a Raspberry Pi, been wanting to add one to the network, but wanting to get a second network card and using a spare Pi 4 and Snort? So I've heard good things about Snort. However, I've also just used Kismet on the Raspberry Pi as like an initial way of detecting whether or not there is an attack coming in. So if I'm looking for specifically Wi-Fi attacks and I'm not looking for, inside the contents of the packets, I have used Kismet as an IDS system before, like running on a Raspberry Pi to just look for attacks in my local area. It actually did a really excellent job of detecting a Wi-Fi pineapple when I plugged it in by accident. And I immediately got freaked out because all these high-level alerts started firing off. And I was like, oh my gosh, something is happening. I'm under attack. Somebody has come for me and they're using a Wi-Fi pineapple. Like, why? Who is it? Is it the government? Is it the police? Is it some random hacker group? And no, it was myself. I'd plugged one in the other room and forgotten about it. But when starting up Kismet, it was immediately aware that the Wi-Fi pineapple was changing the names it was putting out and doing all the specific behavior that only a attacker would theoretically do. So kind of a wake-up call for me that, yes, a Raspberry Pi running Kismet can be a pretty good IDS system for Wi-Fi based attacks because they have some really good rules written in, but obviously it's not going to be doing things like looking for malicious behavior inside the network. For that, you would need something else. All right, so one question by John Doe is, what about Apple Silicon for hacking? What are my thoughts on that? So I've heard some issues with people using Apple Silicon before. I've heard issues with using virtual machines. I've heard issues of using wireless network adapters, although that's mostly just on Apple devices in general. It tends to be very difficult to use a wireless network adapter. So I would say they're frustrating. They're definitely not the, I would say, like the research laptop of choice I would use. However, for like production, for light research, if you can offset the rest of that stuff that's difficult to like a Google Cloud Shell instance or like something else, then you can still get a lot of work done. So for example, like today, I'm going to be showing off a couple of these tools that I'm talking about using Google Cloud Shell. And Google Cloud Shell, if it's working, yeah, allows me, oh, look at that, my connection was lost. Allows me, when it is working, to connect to this Linux instance and run all these tools that I don't want to run on my own computer in this cloud instance. And what's great about that is also that it doesn't save it apparently doesn't save its session. So now I get to do that all over again. Wonderful. But if I want to do Linux-like things on a Mac OS system, it's usually pretty okay. It's just some of the more exotic stuff that tends to be either a bit more locked down or otherwise not helpful. So yeah, I find that there are some really good and useful ways of using Google Cloud Shell to do this sort of thing. And that has got me out of the woods when it comes to having a computer that's a little bit locked down in certain ways. But no, I would definitely recommend like a native Linux computer, like a good ThinkPad that runs Linux really well or something like that in order to get the best experience, because Mac OS can be quite frustrating. Yeah, so this is Google Cloud Shell. Let's say that you're curious about one of these tools that I am talking about today and you want to run it, but you don't want to destroy your own computer. You want to destroy a fake computer that Google gives you. Well, guess what? For the burden of just getting a Google account, you can have a free Linux computer available for you to try out all these weird OSINT or scanning tools without ever wondering if by doing so you were giving root to some random person who uploaded unverified code that nobody has bothered to check. So I find this to be super useful. As you can see here, I have a lot of different things that I've like uploaded. I've got Nicto, I've got DNS Twist, I've got IPGO, email vulnerability checker, and I can just use this as a regular old Linux system. See all this stuff, try it out. And if I want to try and see whether or not Google.com has a vulnerability in their email system, boom, look at that. I can determine that, yes, in fact, Google.com are vulnerable. So yeah, this is just a way that I can go through and try out some of these tools without needing to install them on my own computer, because frankly, Mac OS does sometimes kind of suck for that. That was a very long answer to your question, but I think I've introduced Google Cloud Shell and explained why Apple Silicon might not be the best for you if you want to do a bunch of hacking stuff. Let's see. Oh, look, somebody wants to do promotion on my channel. Well, unless your name is Veronis, I'm not interested. Thanks. All right, let's see. Set up a malicious Pi with DNS spoofing enabled and have a QR code that has people auto join the network. Hey, that's really sneaky. So yes, if you had a Raspberry Pi that looked like a node for the network, but maybe had like a space at the end of the SSID or something else that like set it apart a little bit, then you could theoretically have something where people would scan the network. They'd be like, oh, I'm connected to the network. That's cool. But instead, it could be like a copy of the network or something that looks similar to, a friendly network nearby. And then you could be spoofing the DNS on everything that they're visiting to attempt to phish them or get information that they're trying to keep secret. So that would be a way where you could have somebody scan a network that seems to be very, very similar to an authorized network nearby. Maybe a coffee shop network where people think the easiest way to get access to it is to scan a QR code, but instead they're connecting to a very similarly named network that is going to be malicious and do all this bad stuff instead. So that's a very clever attack. I can imagine that would probably trick a lot of people, because if they were to look at what network they're connected to, it would look like they were connected to the authorized network that they were trying to connect to, or the one that's affiliated with the business that they're at. But in fact, it could actually be a Raspberry Pi running a very, very similar network name and trick any user who scans it. So be careful about scanning QR codes that will connect you to a wireless network. I really like this idea. It's very sneaky, devious, and I do believe that would actually work. All right, so that's why I hated it when restaurants went with QR codes for dining during COVID. I can tell you from personal experience that there are multiple restaurants that definitely regret doing that. Mostly because I have had thermal label printers that make very convincing QR codes of any size, and I've personally replaced the QR codes in many restaurants with other URLs. So when people scan them expecting to go to the restaurant, they instead get something else. So yes, this is something that's a problem because these are not human readable, and provided that the URL looks plausible, most people will continue to go to it, regardless of whether or not there might be a small mistake or something that looks like a little strange. Frankly, a lot of these restaurants just like hard link to wherever their menu is hosted, and the link can look really crazy and long. So changing it to something else is really not that difficult. And I personally have had many different experiences of, pulling the old switcheroo on a QR code with one of these like thermal label printed QR codes. I highly recommend trying it. It is super funny and virtually nobody notices. All right. Well, of course, within reason. Please do not destroy any property or get into trouble. I already do it for ward driving, override ward drive. Anyways, how would you configure for a static setup, long-term setup? For ward driving, you're gonna have to give me more information on that. Looks like James is answering that. Wow, we have a lot of comments. With regards to ThinkPads, you can get used ThinkPads for cheap. Yes, I would say for all the hardware you can get out there for like $200, $300, like a ThinkPad is a great platform for a lot of different things. It could be like a VPN. It could just be like a step up from a Raspberry Pi, but I highly recommend older ThinkPads for like your backup hacking computer. I have one myself. They work really well for that when the keyboards actually work. How safe is Google dorking? Just dorking. I worry that the keyword search warrants are a real thing and probably streamlined to the authorities. So that's really interesting. So what is a keyword warrant? Well, if you go around searching for very sensitive information, let's say that you are one of the 2 people that searches for like a celebrity's home address, like the day before they're murdered. Well, a keyword warrant would put you on the list of suspects because it would allow authorities to basically ask a search engine to say, hey, anybody that searched for this information, we want to know about them within this specific window. And usually it has to be like a pretty niche, a very specific piece of information, personally identifiable information, or something very heavily connected to the crime. It can't be too broad, but it is a legitimate concern that if you were, dorking around looking for something really, truly weird, that maybe you would end up on one of these keyword lists or like warrants. Well, that is where you can use search engines like DuckDuckGo or other things that would make it a little bit harder to actually do the search, to do one of those warrants, or like StartPager or something else that might go and query Google for you in order to keep your actual queries more anonymous. So yeah, I would say that if you are concerned about like having all those search queries tied to your Google account, then absolutely do not do a bunch of Google dorking on your specific personal Google account if you don't want a warrant that might expose all the other information that's in there. I actually did not think of that, but that is a perfectly legitimate concern if you're going to be dorking anything that's like too heavily specified. If you're just doing general security stuff, I would still recommend making a separate account where you just search for weird security stuff, because then you can tell, if it does get involved in the search warrant, you'd be like, listen, I'm a researcher. Like I research this stuff all the time, or I'm a cybersecurity student. I'm doing this as, to learn. You can see very clearly that all these queries are like, just like queries along the same thing, doing Shodan like searches or just general Google dorking. And I think that might be a little bit cleaner. So yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. You could potentially end up in a keyword search warrant if you're searching for a bunch of highly specific and weird stuff. So be careful what your dorks, specifically people's personal information, like that sort of thing, that if that person was involved in a crime or a victim of a crime, then that is a pretty standard tactic now, like for people that are maybe looking up that information before committing a crime. Like that's an easy way of catching people, or at least putting them on the list of suspects. So do be aware of that. That's very insightful. Let's see. I have a spare laptop that I would like to set up as a long-term Kismet station. How would you set up a configuration file for a static setup? Okay, yeah. So like there's a number of different plugins and things that you can do with Kismet. And I've had Kismet running. And if you're not aware of what Kismet is something that will allow you to analyze all the wireless traffic at the area and assemble a bunch of metadata, which then gives you a lot of insights about what each device is doing. It can tell you about what permission a device has to connect to one network or another. It can tell you information about where a device has been in the past or what networks it's searching for. It's really, really insightful. And it can also look for specific behaviors that are associated with products like the Wi-Fi Pineapple or specific Wi-Fi attacks. So what I would say is like you would want a 5 gigahertz radio. You would want to make sure that you're scanning on 5 gigahertz, 2.4 gigahertz, and maybe Bluetooth as well, because it's able to parse it and scan Bluetooth data. And then something to be able to like keep logs and analyze them, like, past a certain reasonable amount of time would be my go-to. I haven't done a heavy amount of modification to it. I've really only run it for like a couple weeks at a time while assessing how it does over a long term. And really just like having alerts like up and ready to check out, like if they are generated. I set my alerts pretty strict. So like all the standard stuff that like APs do that I don't care about, like switching channels and stuff like that to avoid congestion. You can set the alerts like very paranoid, so it warns you like every single time that like a network like changes channels or does this something the least bit suspicious. But frankly, because APs do that all the time, I tend to tone it down a little bit and try to only only look for things that are explicitly malicious. Let's see. Don't forget to disable packet capture if you're going to leave it running. Otherwise, you run the risk of filling up your hard drive. Yes. So having some sort of way of dumping the packets, like once it gets to a certain size, like limiting the size of the capture or the backup is a good idea. Now, do you want to know, like, if there's a certain like device that's like coming into your neighborhood and like connecting to your network like a couple times a day? Yeah, that would be great information to be able to like analyze that pattern and maybe be able to try to determine like who it was or what it was. But at a certain point, all that information will fill up your hard drive. So yeah, you would want to limit the size of that if you were going to run it continuously. Does the alpha adapter increase range in monitor mode? No, I do not believe that it should increase range in monitor mode. When you're putting it into monitor mode, effectively what you're doing is you're telling it that it should ignore the to field on the packet. So usually the wireless network adapter will listen for things that are addressed to it or to everyone, and everything else it'll just drop. So by putting that card into monitor mode, you're effectively just changing the rules, and you're saying, hey, instead of just dropping or ignoring packets that are not addressed to me, I want you to go ahead and show me everything that you're receiving. Now, some wireless network adapters can do this, some of them can't. And the ones that can do it don't really necessarily gain any range when they go into monitor mode. They just gain the ability to listen in on packets that would normally be ignored or dropped by the rules of the wireless network adapter. That was a really good question, though. Let's see. For Bluetooth sniffing and Kismet, you have to use the Adafruit Bluetooth LE sniffer. So on my ThinkPad, it actually has Bluetooth already. I can turn on that Bluetooth, and Kismet can use Bluetooth that's natively on this computer to do that sort of thing. So that's kind of cool. Actually, let's try something new. Can I do this in the middle of the stream? Oh, wow. The chat overlay's now on the screen. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'll try it. It might be easier to see. It might be harder to see, but I'm in control now. So we'll give it a shot. And then James also mentions, yes, a better antenna will pick up more packets. It really is a big trade-off where, like, do you want your reception to look like a donut with an omnidirectional wireless network adapter that's receiving in all directions? And you'll get pretty good range in on the floor, but maybe not so good range like either upstairs or in a specific direction that's far away. Or you can make it like a searchlight or like a flashlight, where instead all the wireless energy is being directed towards a specific point, and you can get like miles of range like this. It is crazy. But you could have a wireless network literally like the next door over and not see it at all if it's outside the beam of where that radiation energy is. So it really depends on where you want to be monitoring. Most people use an omnidirectional antenna because they want to monitor like one floor of a house or one floor of a building. And that donut pattern is actually pretty good at providing steady overall coverage over that area. But if you wanted to monitor like a building from like half a block away, you could certainly just point a Yagi antenna at that building and generally get an idea of what's going on that entire block. So you've really got a lot of options when it comes to how to do sniffing and what kinds of antennas to use. All right. So Androids tend to have, Androids tend to have Bluetooth sniffer in the developer tools. A friend of mine used it, but I've not messed with it yet. So if you have Wiggle Wi-Fi on an Android device, you can go ahead and do Bluetooth sniffing and cellular sniffing and export that data as just like a CSV file and work with it very easily. Now it doesn't it's not taking readings like continuously. I believe it's just like doing like war driving stuff. So it's not like sniffing in that you're getting real time access to every single piece of data that's coming out of it. But if you're just wanting to do war driving with an Android device, then Wiggle Wi-Fi does a really good job of that. So you can like identify the type of device, geolocate it, get its signal strength, and see more information about it using just wiggle.net and export that data really easily if you're interested in doing like just a survey of Bluetooth devices, or if you want to try to locate Bluetooth devices across time and see if maybe you've encountered them in multiple places, which I think is pretty cool. How to when headphone lights still work after PC shutdown? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say a capacitor. That's all I got on that one. All right, so let's see. Rate Hack the Box, T something else, and Portswigger Labs out of 10 each. Okay. So I've actually only worked with one of them. So I'm gonna say Portswigger Labs, I'm gonna give like an 8 out of 10, which I feel like is pretty generous. And the reason why I've docked it a little bit is because it's just down sometimes. So if you haven't tried it before, Portswigger, the creator of Burp Suite, has something called Portswigger Academy, where they allow you to go up against real vulnerable web applications that you could attack and use techniques that attackers use. So it's a great training ground for if you're going to be attacking, like pen testing web applications or pen testing web services. Like it really gets you in the mindset for going after something you're totally allowed to attack and learning all these techniques. Now, do I use Burp Suite to do the labs? No. I actually had some drama when I reached out to them and asked if I could just evaluate it for a couple weeks so I could do like a couple write-ups on how to use it and like make a video featuring Burp Suite. They were like, no. And I was like, okay. So I used OWASP Zap. So I personally like to use the free and open source OWASP Zap to then just go back and do Portswigger Academy. And it works perfectly fine. And I haven't found any of the challenges that I can't do just using OWASP Zap. So I've made a variety of different videos of doing that on the Hack5 channel. So if you want to check them out, I also made a version that runs on the Nugget because I got frustrated that their website was down. So yes, Portswigger Academy, super useful. You can use free and open source tools to learn while using it, and sometimes it's down. Overall, 8 out of 10. Good question. All right, so I'm going to go through. We have a lot of good questions. Some of them about whether or not learning to hack will decrease the chances of losing your virginity. I guess it depends on whether or not you go to DEF CON, but I'm going to skip over that question. And actually, I'm going to go through a couple of the tools I wanted to feature this week before I forget and before I go too far away from them. Again, I just covered Google Cloud Shell, so if you've never heard of that before, it is a free Linux box that anybody can use on their Google account to do all sorts of bad things without endangering your own computer. And instead, put Google's computer in danger. Who cares about it, right? Like, use that thing. So what are some other tools that were interesting this week? All right, so we've got Data Surgeon. This is quickly extract IP, email addresses, hashes, files, credit cards, social security numbers, and more from text. So if you've got a big data dump and you want to go through it really quickly, this tool is supposed to go through and look for interesting information. So that could be a breach, that could be anything. So if you're a journalist, for example, and you find breach data and you want to confirm that there is sensitive information in here, Data Surgeon would be something that you could try out. Have I checked it out not yet? No, because I don't have a data breach to go through, but I will. So seems pretty straightforward. I've seen tools like this before and they've been super helpful. So I put this on my list of things to check out merely because I can just see so many ways that it would be great for users to be able to quickly see what is inside a juicy data dump. All right, so next up, we have Thunderstorm. So I don't know how dumb or awesome this one is. I only like the concept. This is an attack against uninterruptible power supplies. And the idea here is that there's a bunch of different identified CVEs that work against a couple of models, but they're being a little bit cagey here, to be disclosed as of the guide to how to use it. So as with all these tools, I think they're great proof of concepts, but until you get me, a guide on how to use it, I'm not going to try it myself. If you're interested in hacking uninterruptible power supplies, this might be something you're super interested in. As for me, I have not tried it yet. Again, I don't have an uninterruptible power supply. So let's say that you have gotten a PCAP capture. You have your Raspberry Pi scanning your network, and you want to be able to identify any interesting IP addresses from that captured network traffic. So this is something that I actually went ahead and did on my Google Cloud Shell. Where is it? Where is it? Here it is. So if I go ls, I can see, cd ls. Yeah, I can see my IPGeo is something that is here. I think I need to go up a little bit because this comment is on the bottom and is now blocking it. There we go. But anyway, yeah. So if I want to try this, I can do cd IPGeo. I can ls. I can see that it's really, there's just one thing here. So if I run this Python script, Python 3 ipgeo.py, it's going to ask me for the specific, it's going to ask me for the specific file that I want to do a PCAP analysis on. So if I look in this folder, I've got coconut.pcap. I thought I would be able to get all this great information out of it. But in fact, when I run this, it asks me for the PCAP file. I say coconut.pcap. And it'll go ahead and run and crash. And the reason it crashes, it seems to be is a variety of reasons. Right now, it's complaining about something I thought I already fixed, which was T-Shark. But before, it just couldn't identify any IP addresses because guess what? This was a capture outside the network, not inside the network. So it seems like it doesn't capture every it can't work with every PCAP file. So if you don't understand why it's not working for you, it's probably because you're taking a PCAP scan from outside of a network instead of inside the network. So I just learned that the hard way earlier, and it does indeed crash if you do not install T-Shark, which I thought I already did, but whatever. All right, so what else do we have going on? We also have SXDork. So this is a tool that utilizes Google dorking to search for specific information on the internet. Perhaps you're afraid of, having you come up on a geo warrant and you want Google itself to do the searching. Well, you could load up a throwaway Google account, log into your Google Cloud Shell, and run this sketchy OSINT tool on it. Will I run it on my macOS computer? Hell no. I don't have the time to go through this source code. However, I absolutely will run it on my Google Cloud Shell account. So if you want to try out this Google dorking tool, it makes it a little bit easier to run a lot of these very common dorks to look for PDF files or other interesting things on a specific domain. This could be very useful for anybody who's interested in OSINT tools. And again, I highly recommend running this on Google Cloud Shell. All right, so we also got Probable Subdomain. So this is a tool that allows you to look for hidden subdomains using a huge list of popular subdomains. So it's like 501 megabytes of popular subdomains. That is a ton. So if you are scanning for subdomains and you want to find hidden services or do anything like that, then this would be a very useful thing for you. It also goes so far as to allow you to brute force things with this brute forcing list of 278 megabytes. That is a lot. That is in fact, wait, that's a carry that 172 million. Is that, no, there's a comma messed up. 17 million, something like that. So there's a lot of passwords in here. So theoretically, this could be able to get you into some interesting subdomains on a server that you're looking at. So this would be a tool if you wanted to start exploring that. And it looks like it scales up and down as to how many different domains or subdomains you want to explore for. So yeah, interesting tool. I have not had time to work with this yet. It seems to have a GUI interface to make this even easier if you're like a researcher or somebody who's not used to working with command line tools. So this one stood out to me this week to check out. This one is called Upload Bypass Carnage. I went ahead and watched the demo on this, and it's got some hard music playing on it. I would go through all of it. It's great, actually. I really like it. But the ending is really kind of what we want to pay attention. I think it plays ludicrous like the whole time. So you can see what they're doing is they're trying all these different ways of bypassing an upload restriction. And in the end, boom, they were able to bypass a file restriction, upload successfully with a shell.jpg extension. and then use that to get a shell on the server. So this I think is really, really cool. I don't know a lot about file upload bypasses, but this demonstration convinced me that it was interesting and that I should check it out. So this is something that appears to be targeting like PHP misconfigurations, and I am very, very interested in trying this out at some point when I have a valid target to run it against. Unfortunately, I don't today, so I have not run it myself, but I found it to be really interesting and really cool. All right, next up is Web Hacking Playground. I was mentioning Portswigger's Academy earlier, and this is kind of a take on that. A lot of people come out with deliberately vulnerable web applications for trying things out on, and I always like to give those a shout out if people are looking for something they are legally allowed to attack and, you know, not get in trouble. So there is a bit of setup here, and it looks like VMware Workstation Player Hypervisor is recommended. That was an immediate no for me in terms of like trying this out, because there's already things that are deployed that I can take a whack at. But if you're interested in another one of these vulnerable applications that is available for you to learn and hack on, this is one that was recommended, although it might require a little bit of experience with Docker or VMware in order to get started. And last up, this is the one that we just tried out earlier, Email Vulnerability Checker. This purports to finding out whether or not an email address or email domain is vulnerable to spoofing. So if we wanted to find out whether or not it was possible to spoof because they don't have something like maybe the sender protection framework set, then this would be a way for us to install, again, on Google Cloud Shell, this OSINT tool and then target a specific domain. So if I just do cd ls cd, where is it? Email vulnerability checker ls, we can see we have this SPF vulnerability. So that implies to me that this is like a SPF sender vulnerability framework kind of thing. And SPF is sender protection framework. It allows you to figure out whether or not, you know, a sender is really the sender, or if it might be somebody spoofing it. So I'm going to go to, I don't know, somebody that should really have their stuff together. I don't want to shame anyone, but like yahoo.com, like they should, or I don't know, let's see. Yahoo.com's not vulnerable. Okay, I would have been so embarrassed to be the one that like shows everyone that yahoo.com is vulnerable as a service. But no, okay, so yahoo.com is not vulnerable to the SPF, but google.com was. So if we, you know, if we rerun this on google.com, you can see that virtually anybody can pose as a Google executive, which could be a real problem for, you know, google.com. So just a fun little tool that you can use to identify whether or not one particular way of attacking this business might be to write a convincing phishing email that is spoofed. Now, a lot of businesses, this would never work, but it looks like Google is just lagging behind a little bit. All right, so let's see. We have a lot of chat going on. If anybody has any final questions, we are in the last 5-10 minutes of the stream. But it's been fun to show off some of these tools this week. I know that usually we get so caught up in the news that we don't have a chance to go over all the different stuff that is available for hackers to try out. But I've actually got to play with some this week. So if you guys like this, let me know. I will continue to feature some tools each time we do this Wednesday stream. And let's see. What happens if we spoof a Bluetooth address using spoof something? There are actually not many videos related to Bluetooth exploits in wireless hacking. That's because Bluetooth is a really thorny technology to use in wireless hacking. It is not as straightforward as Wi-Fi is, and it takes a lot more to get started with Bluetooth hacking than it does to get started with Wi-Fi hacking. There's a lot of reasons for this. The way that it hops around is definitely one of them. The way that it authenticates only once and pairs in kind of a different way than Wi-Fi does is also something that is unique and interesting to Bluetooth. Spoofing Bluetooth devices is definitely possible, and making Bluetooth things pop up, pairing with Bluetooth things, there's all sorts of interesting stuff you can do. Kind of the furthest that I have been able to get is using the flipper. So I've been using the flipper to identify TVs that have Bluetooth pairing capabilities. And what I'll do is on my phone, I will do a scan and I'll identify a device that has Bluetooth. And then I will see if I can download the application that goes along with it. So if it's a TV, I'll download the specific TV app that's supposed to pair over Bluetooth. And I can usually get all the way up to the point that it offers the pairing menu up on the screen. It says, OK to pair. then I can use an infrared blaster on the flipper to press OK to pair and get remote access to a television or some other sort of smart device in my local area. So that kind of workflow has allowed me to identify Bluetooth devices and force them to pair, but frequently it requires me to have something like a flipper that can do the final stage of pressing OK on the TV menu. Pretty funny though, right? All right, so I think we are just about to the end of the stream. I want to also thank everybody who's been answering questions in the chat. It's really good to have people here who are involved and interested and also come from various backgrounds. And I know that there's some people who are more experienced and less experienced who are joining us today. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for hanging out. So let me see, is there anything? So I also found there was the REST attacker. This was another one that I didn't get a chance to totally go over, but if you're looking for tools that are attacking a REST API, then obviously that would be something to check out. And if you didn't hear from earlier, the talk I was recommending, make sure to check out the talk I did, $5 cyber weapons and how to use them at the Hope Conference. I put it in the chat, but I will also put it in the description. It's a great overview of every bad thing you can do with a microcontroller that might be lying around your house. All right, so thank you, War Panda. Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody who said hello today. Also, what other cloud tools do you recommend if you can't install software on the machine you're using? Yes, so I'll answer that one. That'll be my final question of the day. So I would recommend, first and foremost, Google Cloud Shell is a great resource for being able to do even some like cracking. Like, frankly, they give you a pretty nice GPU on that sucker for free. So, I know some people who have done some brute forcing and some stuff like that. Obviously, you will get shut down if you're doing this too much, but Google Cloud Shell is a great way of doing that. There's also a Google version of Python Pandas that is available. Google Colab, there you go, Google Colab, that also can do some of the brute forcing and interesting stuff. So Google Colab allows you to do Python Pandas like stuff, and allows you to do some really interesting like Jupyter notebooks. Sorry, is what I meant. Jupyter notebooks style stuff. So you can open a Python notebook, you can import data sources, you can do lots of interesting things, and you can share your results very easily with other researchers and have them run your same code, import their data. So frequently what I'll use Google Colab for is like if I have large data sets and I want to like do something cool with processing them with Python to like do analytics on the data or share it with other people, then I'll do that. And then I'll share my Google Colab like sheet or whatever, so that it has like Python code people can add their own data sources to and then run it and do similar analytics and kind of use my research to apply it to their own data sets. So I found that to be super useful and fun. Those are just two of the cloud services that I would shout out, that I use pretty frequently when I'm doing demos and stuff like that. So, okay, so that's going to be it for today. Thank you for bearing with me. Again, I am running the stream by myself now. I barely know how to do it. I'm still learning a lot, but I have to give another shout out to Simply Cyber for teaching me that, you know what, some of it is just getting on the stream as much as possible, hanging out with people and interacting with the community. So want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Varonis. There's a lot of stuff going on this week. You can check out some of it by going to varonis.com/Kody, which will show you the recent events we have coming up this week. And again, I'm also going to be going through more awesome Varonis stuff on Friday. So stay tuned and subscribe to the Security Forward channel to make sure you are notified when we go live on Friday for our new segment when we have my co-host Killian on to talk about all the cybersecurity stuff that happened this week. And since we already have that large language model leaked on 4chan, we're going to have plenty of stuff to talk about on Friday. All right, so that's all we have for this week. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at Kody Kinzie if you want to give me feedback on the show or if you have ideas for next week. And if you have any questions that were not answered because we ran out of time, leave them as a question on the YouTube video, and I will make sure we get to them next week. Yeah, so we're back, and I will see you next time. Bye.